Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. Mental health is one of those topics I'm not sure we really talked about years ago. Certainly not when I was starting out in work. It was just basically a topic just never discussed. You were on your own. Get all of that handled, whatever you want. But now we've got, I think, certainly awareness by companies that understanding mental health certainly is good for them. It allows them to hopefully, improve not just the experience by employees, but the productivity of employees. And so now with COVID, the last 21, 22 months, also we've had mental health issues that have been different and special from the past. And so the confluence of smarter management and leadership of companies in many companies, plus you've got this market trend of some real significant needs in the marketplace, have brought us here together at Global Chamber to talk about mental health. And we're very fortunate to be with Zsofia Szlamka. She is actually working for a very global lady. She's working for a firm based in the UK, but she herself is in Argentina. She's a developmental psychologist and an entrepreneur, and that's a very dangerous combination, I would imagine, and a very special combination. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have her give an introduction, probably a 5 or 10 minute introduction of the concepts and the ideas, and then we're just kind of go from there. We'll have an opportunity for everybody to speak. If you're watching this as a recording, enjoy the conversation and feel free to ask any questions along the way. Those of you that are here live, you'll be able to speak and just either raise your hand or jump in. If you're watching the recording, let us know. info@globalchamber.org is always a great way to contact us for connection to Zsofia or other questions that you may have. Zsofia, just extraordinary background that you bring to this subject, and we're really looking forward to learning more. Thank you for sharing today.
Thank you so much, Doug, for the introduction, and hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling from. I'm Zsofia Szlamka, and thank you for the kind introduction. So now you already know what I'm doing. And indeed, I guess the reason why I'm working in the space of workplace mental health and the reason why I'm doing it globally and remotely, it has to do a lot with my sense of being global, working global. I come from Hungary. Then I was based for quite a while in the UK. And then recently I've been in Argentina and working, but then also working from different other countries for a little while. And so indeed, I'm a developmental psychologist. My initial specialization was actually in autism spectrum disorder, neurodevelopmental conditions. So I come from a somewhat more clinical background initially, and then I started shifting career-wise to workplace mental health. And so today, what I would like us to do is understand a bit together as to what workplace mental health entails, why it's important, how we can work around it, what we can do to make sure that the organizations we are working for, or if we are founders, if we are CEOs, what we can do about it as a leader in an organization. And I have some quite interactive activities for us, a bit of a taster activity, and also a card game with some questions to understand the theme a bit more. So I'm going to share my screen. Typically when I do sessions, when I work with people together, either online or offline, I would be starting with group dynamics and how we are going to be working together today. So since we are doing all of this online, in case if we are experiencing technological problems or internet issues, I have my phone prepared here, so I'm just going to rejoin the call in a moment, so no worries about that at all. And if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. And if you have questions that you wish to ask me privately after, you will have my contact details on the slide, so feel free to reach out to me. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so hopefully now you can already see my screen. I'm Zsofia Szlamka. I'm the founder of AMKA Counselling. We are a community of psychologists, really, and we are all working remotely in this world hit by COVID-19. And I will tell you a bit more about how we work and what we do as part of AMKA Counselling. So we'll have the taster activities and we will be sharing experiences as part of the agenda for today. But I wanted to really start with two case studies and to provoke some thoughts, hopefully, here with these cases. So I'm going to tell you about two stories, two clients that I had been working with. Of course, I'm changing the names and the context well enough so that we can remain confidential and anonymous here in terms of my clients. The first one, she's called Anne, and she's 26 years old. She's working in the legal sector. She's been working in this sector for a few years by now, but because of her age, I'm sure you can tell that she's an early career professional. And so she came to me for counseling sessions in AMKA Counselling with the initial idea that she was feeling very stressed and she found it really hard to focus at work. At work meant being at home and working remotely through her computer all day. And as we explored her situation, we understood that what stress meant to her was actually not only experiencing that tension and that frustration all day and every day, that meant that she found it hard to focus, but it also included an element of feeling lost as to where to go next, what to do later, how she should progress in her career. So in the sessions that followed with her as part of workplace mental health, as part of counseling sessions in the context of workplace mental health, we worked on the one hand on helping her develop coping mechanisms so that she can cope with stress a bit better. So really addressing the symptoms, the surface level of her well-being, which was about stress. But then we also started addressing the question as to why she's feeling so lost about where next, how to progress with her career. And so that was for her an underlying problem, an underlying issue that meant that further triggered those stress symptoms. So this was the case of Anne. And then the second case that I wanted to mention to you, Mike, who is 57 years old. He is in the banking sector and he's actually in a leadership position, in quite a senior position, responsible for the work of many, and a global position, which means that he overlooks the work of people based on different continents, responsible for the productivity across time zones and across cultures and contexts. He came by telling me, I'm so exhausted, I'm so tired that I just can't do more, I'm done, I'm finished. That's what he was saying. He was saying he was at the time so tired that he could fall asleep at any moment. And he was seeking counseling for this very reason. So as we explored in the first few sessions as to what this problem entailed over and beyond the exhaustion and tiredness, we found further signs of burnout. I'm sure many of you have heard about or may have even experienced burnout at some point in life. Not only did he feel tired and exhausted all day, every day, but he felt he was lacking motivation to keep going on. He felt extreme mood swings. Even during one day, at one point he would feel angry, another point he would feel very happy. So these mood swings really characterized his everyday life at that point. So as part of workplace mental health counseling, what we did with Mike was exploring how to cope and how to take a break from work. Experiencing burnout means it really is the time, it is the red flag to take a break, to take a stop, reflect, and almost push that restart button, really. And then after that, we were also looking at where next. Mike was also, his stress was also further triggered by the fact that many of his friends were thinking about retirement, started really planning as to what comes when career eventually ends, when there's no work anymore. And he felt really quite lost as to what that would mean for him, being in such a senior, such a leadership position, what that would mean, what that would look like. So we worked on these two kinds of issues. So I wanted to tell you about these two case studies because to me, the two cases really nicely represent some of the core questions that as psychologists, or more specifically in AMKA Counselling, that we would be working on. Being a remote company, being a remote community of psychologists, we would be working with people across sectors, across geographical locations, even across languages. And then we would be tackling questions that arise as part of being at a certain workplace, but questions that also very often tap into personal life. So we look at mental health from this very holistic perspective. So if we were to define what workplace mental health means, we would find that there's at least three questions we would be looking at. On the one hand, protecting mental health by reducing work-related risk factors that would induce mental health problems. So it's protection. It's also promotion of good well-being. So promoting mental health by developing positive aspects, promoting things that are going well. And then finally, addressing mental health problems among the workforce, regardless of the cause. So whether or not the cause of a mental health issue is related to the workplace directly, we would be trying to support the person and the problem that is there. An example for this third one would be, for example, someone, myself, as I mentioned, I worked in the autism space and in the space of neurodevelopmental conditions. So someone living with an autism spectrum condition in the workplace, it's something that is not related to the workplace itself, but it's a question that we can help with, and it's an area where we can support the person on the spectrum with how to adjust to various different triggers to stress or triggers to anxiety at the workplace. So this is just one example. Right, so after a bit of an introduction to workplace mental health, broadly speaking, I wanted to tell you a bit about how we do it at AMKA Counselling specifically. So as I said, we are a social enterprise. We consider our work to be really at the heart of supporting people and supporting the workforce, each and every person, the individual in the organization. And so we do that remotely. Our psychologists are based in different countries. Right now I'm in Argentina. I have a colleague in Argentina who is providing services in Spanish language, for example. And then I also have another colleague in Hungary, for example. So we would be promoting mental health and protecting mental health across time zones in different geographies remotely. And so basically, sorry, there was some background noise. We are doing so in two key ways. So on the one hand, we have a program that is called Runway to Wellbeing. It's a 6-month-long program that we would be implementing in typically big organizations, medium to large-sized firms, that consists of, on the one hand, workshops for and with leadership and management in the firm in order to implement organization-wide transformation for better mental health, and on the other hand, provide counseling packages and counseling sessions to individual members of the organization. So addressing mental health issues and transforming the organization for better well-being. This is the Runway to Wellbeing program that we have been doing. And then we have the counseling packages separately for companies that would like to implement or have support available for their employees. And then we have these remote counselors worldwide who can provide these services in different languages, in different time zones. And so we have the range of languages that we provide counseling in has been increasing, which I'm really excited about. So we, of course, started with English and Hungarian because of the fact that I come from Hungary. Quite a niche language, of course, and then Spanish, and then adding on Portuguese. Here you have my contact details. We can also pass it on the chat, so feel free to either check out our website or email me if you have any questions or if this is something interesting to you. And at this point, I wanted to play a card game with you. So I stopped sharing for a moment. What we are going to do is that I'm going to share my screen once again and explain the game itself. Give me one moment. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yep.
Perfect. Right, so here you can see a mirror board. This is going to be the card game itself. This is a broad overview. What we have here is 3 key themes: the psychologist, the workplace, and the therapy. So I prepared a couple of questions per theme that are quite, questions that I would very often get in relation to the role of the psychologist at the workplace, in relation to the workplace and mental health at the workplace, and then also the therapy. So what we are going to do is I will get questions from you. I would like you to choose questions from here and type in the number of the question to the chat. So for each theme, I'm going to take 2 questions. So basically the quickest can get to ask questions. So once you have a question selected, please type the number in the chat, and then I will answer them. Right, we already have 2, so thank you very much. For the next theme, you will have some more time to ask further questions. So we'll start by 5 and then 1. Question 5 is, what can the psychologist do if himself or herself feels burned out? This is a question my clients very often ask me about. Of course, as psychologists, the core to our work is anonymity and confidentiality. But what we do have to support our own mental health is a supervisor. So what this means is that each psychologist has a supervisor who is typically a more senior psychologist, to who we would disclose our own feelings, our own challenges, or things that are going very well. And then we would be discussing this with the supervisor. We would also typically use these supervision sessions to discuss in what different ways we can support our clients. So of course, confidentiality is really important here. The supervisors are not allowed to discuss anything we disclose to them with other people. But basically, this is the support that we get as professionals so that we do not get burned out. Right, and then question number 1, what has been your most difficult case so far? Yes, there's a word missing there. My most difficult case, it was many years ago. I was still a trainee psychologist at the time. I was in university. And just for context, I completed my undergraduate degree in Hungary. And in Hungary, as part of the undergraduate program, one would do practicals in different hospitals and different schools of psychology. So one would do child and adolescent psychiatry, one would go to an adult psychiatry. So my most difficult case was in the adult psychiatry during my traineeship, during my undergraduate program, where it was a case of, it was a diagnostic process. The client was showing psychotic symptoms, and I was very young. I was still a student. I did not really know how to handle. So basically the whole case had to be handled together with my supervisor. I learned a lot from that case. I also learned that the importance of supervision and the importance of having more senior professionals supporting you and teaching you along the way is really something that one cannot miss. Okay, let's move to the next theme for a few questions about the workplace and the role of mental health at work. I hope you can see it very well. And when you are ready, please type in the number of questions in the chat. Question number 10 from Michael. We'll wait for one more. Question number 8 from Larry. All right, so question number 10, give us a few examples of practices that go against organizational well-being. Okay, so a few examples. So the first one for me is an organization that does not promote transparent communication. So what does that mean? What does that look like? It would mean that employees, especially those who are not in leadership or managerial positions, do not feel comfortable asking questions, asking for feedback, or feel that they are not allowed to disclose their opinion to their team. This would typically happen in case if the leader in an organization or a leader in a team is really quite authoritarian and does not promote participatory approaches in teamwork. And so the risk of this is employees feeling on the one hand stressed about their own performance since they do not get feedback. On the other hand, if issues arise in the workplace or in relation to productivity, they will not get disclosed to management. So the issues will only really be discussed once they have consequences. So it really goes against proper management of communication problems or conflicts at the workplace. So this is one that would go against organizational well-being. Of course, on the flip side, what this means is promoting transparent communication, promoting participatory approaches really supports good well-being at work. Another example of something that does not promote good well-being at work is, it's really quite simple, but it's working over hours or outside of working hours and not having clarity as to what the expectations are in terms of the number of hours to be worked. And so this would typically happen with again, leaders or team leads, team managers who would themselves work out of hours and who would, for some reason, fail or forget to communicate that they do not expect others to follow the same pattern. Another thing I've seen before was team leads also using personal communication channels to reach their team members or their team or their employees on WhatsApp or Facebook, let's say, and so employees feeling stressed and anxious about having to reply out of working hours or having to work out of working hours. So again, on the flip side, what this means is, again, it comes back to clarity and transparency, but and let me also acknowledge and appreciate the role of leaders and team leads when it comes to clear and transparent communication, but setting out expectations and very specifically working hours, communication among team members, and making sure that we are clear that it's not expected that you reply at 11 p.m. Of course, this gets even more complicated when we think about work across time zones. So something that even I myself do is I add to my signature the time zone that I'm working in, and I make sure I communicate there that I work based on my time zone and based on my convenience, and I do not expect at all that people would reply immediately or at all. Okay, and then question number 8, how do I know if I burned out? So I think this question has always been important. With COVID, this has, and with home office, and then in the Northern Hemisphere, winter approaching, I think this has become even more important. So the number one sign is that you feel continuously tired and exhausted. You wake up in the morning and you feel the same tiredness and exhaustion. You feel a lack of motivation. And it's not just something you would feel for a few hours, but you would feel it continuously for a number of days and all day, every day. Further signs would be added on stress and anxiety. Further signs would mean a lack of or losing appetite, or on the flip side, having an appetite that is too much, that is atypical. And then lastly, a change to sleeping patterns. So not being able to fall asleep or sleeping too much, not being able to wake up. It's very interesting that our eating and sleeping patterns are the first ones to change when there's an issue with our mental health, with our mental well-being. Okay, let's go and have a look at the therapy. What does the therapy look like? Have a look at the questions, and again, type in the number of the question that you're interested in to the chat.
There's some good ones in there.
We have number 7. We'll wait for one more. And number 5. Okay, so number 7, are there any well-being related tips and tricks that you are using as well in your personal life? Indeed. So something that I will tell you 2 things. One is that, so I'm an entrepreneur. I'm also finishing my PhD. I'm involved in different projects, and that has always been the case. So for me, being overworked is a big risk. So something that I do is using my calendar. It's something very practical. I use my calendar to block times for myself or for sort of personal use. And I have a reminder for myself set for every week to revise the calendar whether I am doing too much. So when I feel that I'm exhausted and there's too much going on, I revise the calendar and critically analyze whether what I have scheduled makes sense, whether I'm overdoing it. So to give you one example, the last week I realized that I'm planning to do way too much till the end of the year. So I'm basically revising what is really feasible in there. And the tip here is the calendar invite or the reminder for yourself to block the time for it. It's not because I would forget or anything, but basically with having so much going on in our lives, it is easy to just sort of postpone or delay these kind of revisions of our time and of our well-being till further notice, right? So this is one. The other is, as I'm working remotely, I'm sitting a lot, and I sit in front of this computer, and then basically I would get up every once in a while to eat or to drink. And so that's not great for my physical health, which would then have an impact on my mental health. So what I do, and I keep advising my clients to do the same, is always have at least a 5-minute break in between sessions or in between meetings that I have. And then, so I get up and I do some squats, I would drink some water, I do something physical so that my body doesn't get very, very tired. Okay, number 5. Recently, I find it hard to focus. What should I do? Okay, so when you find it hard to focus, the very first thing I would say is have some time for yourself and think what's happening. In this question, the word recently is very important. It kind of entails that typically you find it you can focus typically in your life, and something happened, which means that recently you find it really hard to focus. So think what happened. Is it that you've been booking way too much and therefore you're getting tired and therefore you're losing your ability to focus? Has something occurred in your personal life, something either very positive or something negative that impacts your emotional well-being and therefore you find it really hard to focus? I think a mistake that we sometimes, and I include myself in this, so I'm saying as human beings, a mistake that we often make is when we find it hard to focus, we try to push ourselves a bit more and work a bit more and invest more time into our work instead of really thinking what happened there. So instead, if you take a bit of a break and you figure out what happened, then you will be addressed the underlying issue. Psychological tips and tricks, mental health tips and tricks work when there's nothing too much ongoing. So a calendar invite to reflect on how things are going for yourself works when there's nothing major. When there's something, when you're exhausted, when you're getting close to, say, even burnout, when there's a personal loss, when there's an emotion, something really emotional ongoing, then it's important to acknowledge that it's happening and then give yourself the time to address the problem itself and not try to address it on the surface level, on the symptom level. Okay, let's do another round of this. And then we will do a bit of a taster as well. Okay, I'm going to take 2 more questions about the psychologist. Okay, we have 2 9s. That's great. So we'll have space for 1 more and 3. Okay. How can we know if the work of the psychologist is effective? Sorry for the typos here. So the way in which, I love this question because I don't think many people ask this, and I think we really should ask ourselves. So one thing that many colleagues would typically do anyways is assess your mental health in the beginning and at the end of the sessions that you have. So it's something you can ask from your psychologist. How do you know that my mental health is progressing? And then it's either through questionnaires or surveys, or it's through some form of a standardized measurement process through which they will be able to tell you that. Otherwise, the other thing is that you can do is in the beginning of the counseling process, the therapy, there would be some goals set by yourself and the psychologist, and basically assessing where you are in relation to those goals could tell you whether the process, the psychologist working with that psychologist is really working for you. So make sure that when you engage in this process, you are aware, you do remember why you went into that process, what goals you set with the psychologist, and then feel where you are, assess where you are in relation to those. All right, and then we had question number 3. What's the difference between a psychologist and a coach? Okay, so I'm a psychologist myself. I have never been a coach and I'm not involved in coaching specifically. I'm going to tell you my understanding of the difference in the way in which I would refer cases from a psychologist to a coach and vice versa. As a psychologist, we are really trying to support the mental health and well-being side of things, which means that people come to us when there's an issue that arose, and this issue can range from something that many people over the course of their lifetime would experience, so mood swings, stress, even depressive symptoms. These are questions that most of the people at some point in their life do experience. But then the issue can go to a more clinical extent, and then that's where we would perhaps start a diagnostic process and refer the case to a clinical psychologist. Whereas in my understanding, the coach is working with you in relation to milestones in your life, whether it's in your personal or in your personal life or in your career, and would be advising you on how to progress. A very big difference for me is that the psychologist will never give you advice. We will always be there as a mirror to help you reflect and to help you grow and help you understand the problem or the issue that you're experiencing, but we will never give advice, versus a coach would also be able to give you options, give you alternatives, think together with you. Okay. Let's do one more about the workplace and one more about the therapy, and then we'll go to the last part of what I planned for today. I'll wait for one more number from the workplace section. Seven. Okay, so Thomas was diagnosed with a mental health problem. He's afraid of sharing this information at work. What can he do? So I don't think there's a general answer to this, but I'll tell you two options that I think are quite, that would typically happen. So on the one hand, hopefully and ideally that workplace has employee assistance programs in place or has access to a psychologist, like for example, through AMKA Counselling. This is a good question to approach a psychologist with. And so the psychologist can support you in finding your way of identifying or disclosing this information at work. Sometimes it can be helpful so that your colleagues know what's happening with you. One illustration to this is, for example, if you do suffer from stress or anxiety, or if you have, for example, autism, let's give that example as well. There are certain working environments and working conditions that would help you thrive, and then certain others that would provoke stress. So basically, if you do manage to disclose this piece of information at work, then you will be able to create an environment for yourself that promotes your well-being, and you will not have to stay in environments that would further provoke your stress or discomfort. On the other hand, you might also find yourself in a situation where you do not want to disclose a label or a category because you do not think that it would impact your ability to work or the extent to which you feel comfortable working in the environment where you are. I had a client, for example, who was diagnosed with a learning disability, and basically she sought my advice as to how to progress. So in counseling, she figured her way of doing this, and what she learned for herself is that it's actually not something she finds important that others would know. So she decided not to disclose it, and she felt comfortable with that decision. So there's different ways in which this can happen, but basically finding your way of either disclosing it or not is really important, and having access to support when it comes to these decisions can be really helpful. All right, and then let's do one more question about the therapy. So I'll wait for a question on the chat, a number on the chat. One more number, please. Number 7. Are there any well-being? Oh, I think we've covered this one. Yes, the well-being tips that I'm also using in personal life. Let's do another one. We've covered this one already. Number 8. Should I choose an older or a younger psychologist? Okay, so I like this question because I'm among the more like the early career professionals in this space, and then it's a question that I get asked a lot. So whenever you choose either a psychologist, but this can be a coach, whenever you choose a support person, the most important is that you go with your gut feeling. So there are some people who just find it impossible to seek advice or seek support from someone too old or too young. And that's okay. And you don't have to give any reason as to why that is the case. So go with someone you feel comfortable with. In a sense, age should not matter. The expertise should be there irrespective of age. What will matter, there's a term in psychology, sorry about it, it's called rapport. Rapport means the way in which you relate to your psychologist and the way in which your psychologist relates to you. So this connection is the one that will have that healing effect, hopefully, throughout the counseling process. And so age can have an impact on this. So what this means is that the way in which a younger person would relate to an older one will differ from two people who are in the same age and vice versa. So go with your gut feeling. The expertise should not differ. The rapport will be different with someone who is very close to you in age or with someone who is much younger or much older than you. This would be my summary. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this way of asking questions from me. In the last part of this meeting, what I would like all of us to do is a bit of a taster session as to what it looks like to be working with a psychologist in the space of workplace mental health. So I have an activity. It basically just needs all of you to have a piece of paper with you and to take some notes for yourself. Okay, so I will guide you through the steps, and then with that we'll get a bit of an experience. I would like you to think about a very stressful situation that you have recently experienced, one that you can recall the details of. I'll just give you a moment to identify a situation, a very stressful one. Once you have this situation in mind, what I would like you to do first is to write down in keywords as to what happened. Describe the situation, write it down in a few words. And you can signal to me throughout this exercise that you're ready with either just like looking at me in the camera or raising your hand on Zoom, so I know that you're ready for the next step. Okay, so once you wrote down the situation, I would like that you take some more space on the paper that you have ready, and we will be analyzing this situation in different ways. So we will be writing different paragraphs, okay? So the first one, I would like that you keep this situation in mind and you write down as to how you felt in this situation, emotions, feelings in keywords, please. When you are ready, the next paragraph will be about thoughts. Think about this situation and try to identify very clearly as to what you thought about, thoughts that crossed your mind. And when you're finished with this, the next thing that I would like you to think about is the way in which you felt in your body. How did your body react? Did you experience any physical reactions, anything unique in terms of your physical experience in this very stressful situation? Okay, and then lastly, I would like that you, below all of this, you write down one last thing, which is, what did you do? And here, please write down actions, behavior. What did you do? All right. So now have a look at your answers. And I will ask a few questions and basically reflect for yourself as to how this exercise worked for you. Did you find it easy to answer all of these questions, or were there any questions that you found harder to answer? Sometimes there are people who find it very easy to recall emotions, but find it very hard to identify what they thought. Or vice versa, people who had a lot of thoughts, a very strong cognitive component in this stressful situation, but found it very hard to identify emotions. And then there are also people who feel it's exactly the same, or it's similarly easy or hard to answer these questions. Identify what applies to you. Do you have areas that were harder to reply to? Were there ones that were easier? Finding a recently, Donaji is saying, hard for me, finding a recently stressful situation. So that sounds great. Like that can mean that you have not been experiencing too much stress recently. That's an amazing thing to be starting off from. Another question that I would like you to reflect on is whether one or the other component was very strong. Do you find that you had a lot of feelings, but you did not think much about the situation? Did you find that you had a lot of thoughts, but you did not have anything particular in terms of a physical reaction to the stressful situation? And the reason why reflecting on this is important is because this is how we start identifying your individual, your personal ways of coping with stress. Once you are aware of how you react to these situations, whether it's the emotional component that is more present for you, whether it's the thoughts, or whether you find yourself having been doing many things but not really feeling or thinking much about it, then that's how we can get started and think, okay, how can we learn from this? How can we support you in reacting better to a situation that might come with a lot of stress? Okay, so this was really just a bit of a taster activity as to how we would be working with individuals or even with groups when it comes to mental health at work. Of course, stress is one of the most important issues that we are facing and that we are working with as psychologists across industries, across organizations, across cultures as well. But then the experience of stress or the triggers to stress would really differ across individuals, across sectors, across cultures even. So I wanted to leave the last few minutes for some sort of more open discussion, sharing experiences, asking questions if you have any. So I just wanted to open the floor now to all of you to share what you think about workplace mental health, whether you have come across a situation in which your employer or employee had to work with a psychologist or had found yourself in a situation where mental health was at stake.
Would anybody like to ask a question or make a comment? Thanks for all your questions and support already so far. Just feel free to.
Please. Can I ask one?
Go ahead, Mike.
So obviously you say you work in different countries with different languages and different types of people, your team. Do you find there's differences or traits in different countries and different, do you find, say, certain countries, or is it too vague a question? Is it always down to individual? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Can you spot any patterns?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I do. So I think there are certain cultural differences that are worth knowing about. And then of course, it would also really depend on the individual. I find that, so I come from Eastern Europe. When I work in the Eastern European region, for example, awareness of mental health is very different from working in Western Europe, to give you one example, and one example from home, really. So what it means is the way in which people would talk to me about mental health related problems would be very different. They would use a very different vocabulary, and it would also need me to speak about mental health in a very different way. Another example would be what an organization or an individual expects from a psychologist or an organization like AMKA Counselling. In cultures that there are cultures and countries that would expect solutions, that would expect sort of quick fixes, as if almost like on a consultancy level, that we come in and we fix the situation as the experts brought in. And what's interesting is that psychology and counseling, in my experience, works best when it's when the other person participates in the process. And so allowing that to happen while managing expectations can really be challenging. And then there are like challenges that would, or differences that would be a mix of language and culture. So, and again, giving an example from Hungary, there are certain terminology from psychology that doesn't translate to Hungarian. So then finding the right way so that on the one hand, on the AMKA counseling level, we can keep our processes the same, but it translates well. Now that can be challenging. And I'm saying this based on my mother tongue, but I know from my colleagues that it would also every now and then happen in other languages. And then just to give you one more example, which I find super interesting, in Argentina, for example, there's a very big tradition to psychoanalysis. Most of the psychologists would come from a psychoanalytic approach. I represent a cognitive behavioral therapy oriented approach to well-being. And so how do you work with this? Or how do you work across settings where people expect, again, it's about expectations. What do I expect? A year-long therapy that's about my childhood, or a 5-week-long therapy by the end of which I aim to have changed my behavior, right? And so it's about managing that and making sure that we communicate what we can do, but in a way that it works best for you. So yeah, thanks for the question. I love sort of everything that is cross-cultural. Any other questions or comments?
I'm wondering, are you seeing something different in the last 21 months, 22 months with COVID that we didn't see before, or things that are worse or better?
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember the year before COVID, I was in London and I was at an event where many entrepreneurs and leaders of from the banking and financial sector were present. And people asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm a psychologist and I'm working in the space of mental health and workplace mental health. And I got a lot of response, not really understanding why it's important or like sort of how that would relate to an organization in banking and finance. They felt it was so far removed. And then with COVID made it so visible, sadly, unfortunately, but it made it so visible why mental health is important and how mental health can be heavily impacted by external circumstances, not only personality changes or something that is really within in your personal life. So I definitely see a lot more awareness, a lot more discussions about this topic, which is great to see. And then I would say that a lot of organizational change as well. So I think there's been a lot of action taken to make sure that employees are being taken care of, and that I think their voices are a lot more heard now, I would say, in my experience.
Very good. Well, we're come to the end of the hour, so we should respect everybody's time and wrap up. Wondering, is there anything that you would like to say in closing?
Well, I just wanted to thank you for coming today and listening and interacting and being present with me in this session. And I do hope that as part of Global Chamber, these are discussions that we can continue having, and do let me know if I can be of any support in that process. So thank you very much for having me, Doug.
Our pleasure, Zsofia. So this has been a little bit of a different kind of a program here at Global Chamber, but really appreciate all of you who listened and participated. And Zsofia, in terms of the information in connecting to you, I did in LinkedIn put your contact information. You may not be able to find that, those of you on the call, but if you can't or don't or haven't recorded it, please send an email to info@globalchamber.org. There it is right there. There's a lot of Z's in there.
Yes. You can't get my name mistaken. When you see my name, it's obvious with the Z and the S. Yeah.
And actually, Donahi is reminding me, and sorry, I totally messed up on that, Donahi. What we wanted to have Donahi say a few words here at the end for her program, that is the Butterfly 2022. Donahi, are you available to make a comment?
Yeah, I will do it very short to keep everybody's time, to respect everybody's time. We are hosting a program for business owners to help them to have the best year of their life so far. And we will balance 4 areas. One is health, the other one is love, the other one is wealth, and the last one is power or influence. So in case you're interested, you will have a great discount for being a Global Chamber member, 40% off until the 9th of December. So in case you're interested, you can reach me or contact either Doug or Cesar. We will be happy to enroll you. Thank you very much.
I've known Donahi for about a dozen years, and when we first met, she was like the #2 person, but basically doing all of the work in this organization, or at least it appeared to me that way, just very calmly going about the work of getting all of the things done that needed to be done. And then she got promoted to being the top person, and she subsequently has had leadership positions. I've watched her progress in her career. So now she has her own company, Intech National. She's very smart, very passionate. The Butterfly program, this is the, what year now is this? Is it the 2nd year that you've done this?
It's the 2nd year I have promoted it, yes.
Okay. And so, so it was very successful in the first go around, and now this year, it's coming up very quickly next week. And so we definitely want people to learn about it, to understand it, and hopefully participate, because Donahi is going to take you on a ride of your life. And so you'll be seeing us promoting it here the next several days. and I definitely encourage you to find out more. Michael, I saw that you had reached out on LinkedIn and had mentioned about this one. Michael is the kind of person I think that would definitely be the kind that would be understanding of the value of this, and also know people that could be would be interested. Donahi, anything else that you'd like to say about it?
No, that we already connect with Michael. We already have an appointment set. So thank you, Duke, for connecting us. And thank you, Zsofia. I love your dynamic. It was very, very interesting. So thank you very much for all that you shared today.
Thank you so much.
Very good. So Zsofia, anything else? I think, anything else to wrap up?
I think all clear, all said and done by now. Thank you so much.
Very good. Do you ever make it back to Hungary from time to time?
I really hope that next week I make my way back there. Let's hope that Omicron does not come in the way.
Okay. A visit with Emily for the holidays, I presume.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate the information and the content today, and we'll definitely have other programs that include this topic and get you, Zsofia, in front of more members. Thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.
And you. Bye-bye.